live here. Uh, God bless you. Good morning. Good to see everybody. And I am honored that Pastor, among so many others, asked me to come up here and share a testimony for something that I'm thankful for. And I'll try to get through this without being emotional. I wasn't so successful at that this morning. So I want to say first, my thankful is for for a God that doesn't ever forget who we are and promises that He makes to us. So, not to go back too long ago, but I'll try to start at the beginning. As I mentioned this morning, is I think a lot of reflection I've had on a time when I was a very young man. My parents did not go to church. I generally got pulled to church with an aunts, uncles, grandparents, or really whoever would take me, and not always at my request sometimes. But specifically one service that has really stuck through me at time. It was a healing service. What I came to know later in life was an Assemblies of God. I had no idea that my family was Assemblies of God back in the day. But I remember being a young guy, probably 12, 13, standing as far back in the crowd. Everybody had come forward, and I was as far back trying to hide as I could, because all I saw was lots of hands in the air and people falling over. And I just remember a very distinct point, and I probably would have been from here to the doorway, and the crowd just kind of parting. I mean, if I ever imagined what the Red Sea looked like, it probably looked a lot like that. And the pastor pointing to me, and of course me turning around to look to find nobody behind me, and calling me forward and having no idea. And I got to the front, had no idea what to say, no idea what was going on, no idea what to say. And really didn't have to say anything. I started to talk, and he's like, just kind of stopped me and said, "Son, you're looking for something, and God's going to show you one day. God's going to meet you one day where you're at." So, sorry. And it begins. So I look up to this day, and I'll try to fast forward so many things along life that, to where I'm at right now is, I never was supposed to join the Navy. I originally went to the Air Force, had never even thought about the Navy, and here I am today. Was not supposed to be in the job that I'm in that has allowed me to promote to a place where I can't even promote any farther. And I was never even supposed to do this job. Was not supposed to be in Jacksonville ever. Was not supposed to come to Mayport to a ship in my first tour way back in the late 80s. Was not supposed to be in the area the night I met my wife. And just a few hours later, to put 5 hours of snow or 5 inches of snow on the ground in Jacksonville, if those of you remember the last time it snowed like that. So I think just a few hours later, had I waited even one day, we would have never even had a first date probably. I would have not been able to get from Ocala to Jacksonville where I was at the time. So I say all that to get to the point of, when we came back to Jacksonville after a really bad tour in Memphis, Tennessee, where neither one of us were happy and life didn't seem to be going real well. I tried to get out of the Navy. I took lots of interviews to get out of the Navy, and doors kept closing for me every time to get out. And we came to Jacksonville, and we thought things would be just happier just being back in Jacksonville and being home, and it wasn't working out like that. We had a nice car that we had to give back. We had that little blue truck you see sitting out in the parking lot that was Joe Epps. I don't know if lots of folks remember that, 20 years ago that belonged to us. And it was Teddy and I and Seth in a car seat riding around in that tiny little single cab pickup. And I don't even think we realized at that time how blessed we were to have just that. But it was Teddy that kind of came into this church the first time. Sorry. So just looking for daycare, and we went on from there. So, she was far more faithful than I was up front. Sorry. And I fought a lot of things. I remember sitting in Sunday school with, Olin and Dan, and every week saying, "Brother, we'll see you here next week." Lots of times there weren't a lot of next weeks. There were for her, but there wasn't for me. I fought a lot of things. And I remember one thing specifically that came to my heart was tithing. I hadn't promoted real good. I had promoted up to that point, but I hadn't really promoted. And I was slow, and it was one of the things that was really frustrating where I was in my career. and we had lots of discussions about tithing, and that was probably the hardest thing for me to give up that piece, because all I could say is we can't afford it, we can't do this, we can't do that, and I don't know what trigger was, but one day I went home and said, hey, I think I'm gonna buy into this thing. I'm starting to, and there were so many people that shared with me at that time, and I said, I think we're going to do this. I'm okay with this. I don't know how we're going to do it, but we're going to do it. And she said, do you know you have been? And we have been for months. It was just an amazing thing. And I thank God for, a good wife who beyond all that, stayed the course and prayed for us long before I was willing to. And it's been such a great thing since then. And I really think, that day was the promise made many years before. And since then, and the blessing is, since that day, and for the last, for those who've been around the service area, some of those we haven't exactly been promoting, for the last 15 years to 20 years of my career. We've been getting smaller and bigger. And since that day, I have not missed a promotion up to this last one, not one. And and in every opportunity I've had people, that have called me and contacted me and said, hey, how did you do it? And I always start with, are you a Christian? And if the answer is no, then I always tell them, you'll not understand what I'm going to tell you next. That's just my testimony, and it's what I'm thankful for. And I'm thankful that, in many years up to that point, God could have detoured me, or I could have detoured myself so many different ways. And every time, God put me where he wanted me to be, even when I had no idea who he was. No idea. So he's a great God. Thank you.